Star Trek Strange New Worlds Spock actor teases his arc for Season 3. His Vulcan-ness just won't be enough. When Star Trek Strange New Worlds returns for Season 3, it looks like Spock's long-running struggle between logic and emotion is about to reach a breaking point. Ethan Peck, who has brought new depth to the half-Vulcan, half-human science officer, recently teased that the next chapter will challenge Spock in ways that go far beyond his usual internal conflict. His words, "his Vulcan-ness just won't be enough," promise a fascinating evolution for one of Star Trek's most enduring characters, hinting that Spock will be forced to confront what being both Vulcan and human truly means. And in Strange New Worlds, that exploration has never just been philosophical, it's been deeply personal, messy, and often heartbreakingly human. Spock's evolution so far, the duality that defines him. When Strange New Worlds began, Ethan Peck's Spock was still finding his equilibrium. Unlike Leonard Nimoy's older, more composed version or Zachary Quinto's fiery reboot take, Peck's interpretation lives in the emotional in-between, a Spock who wants to be purely logical but is constantly betrayed by the feelings he tries to suppress. Season 1 introduced that tension early on. His romance with Turing offered viewers a rare glimpse into Vulcan intimacy, revealing just how much discipline and restraint Vulcan relationships require. But it also set up a beautiful irony. Even in a culture devoted to logic, love, and jealousy, can still find a way to surface. Season 2 then pushed Spock even further. After losing his Vulcan emotional control in charades, Spock was forced to experience the full force of his human emotions. Suddenly, he couldn't hide behind logic anymore. He had to feel everything. It was one of Strange New Worlds' funniest and most heartfelt episodes, as it allowed Peck to explore comedic vulnerability while deepening the ongoing theme of identity. By the end of the season, that experiment in humanity wasn't just an episode-long gimmick. It had lasting consequences. Spock's relationship with Turing fractured, his dynamic with Nurse Chapel complicated, and his perception of himself forever altered. He discovered, perhaps for the first time, that controlling his emotions wasn't the same as understanding them. His Vulcan-ness just won't be enough. What Ethan Peck's tease really means, Peck's intriguing quote feels like both a warning and an invitation. His Vulcan-ness just won't be enough implies that logic, the very foundation of Spock's identity, is about to fail him. For a Vulcan, that's not just a personal crisis, it's existential. It's possible Season 3 will put Spock in a situation where pure logic can't solve the problem. Maybe it's a moral dilemma, maybe it's an emotional loss, or maybe it's a moment that demands empathy rather than reason. In Star Trek, such moments are what make characters human, literally and metaphorically. This phrase also fits perfectly with the direction Strange New Worlds has taken Spock so far. The show has always treated his Vulcan nature as something he aspires to master, but never fully become. It's not that Spock isn't logical, it's that he's too human to let logic alone define him. And Season 3 might be the point where he finally realizes that embracing his humanity doesn't make him weak, it makes him whole. A prequel's challenge, evolving without contradicting canon. One of the most impressive balancing acts Strange New Worlds has pulled off is evolving Spock without contradicting what comes later in the original series. Fans know where Spock's story ultimately leads, his calm, measured wisdom aboard Captain Kirk's Enterprise. But seeing how he became that person is part of the joy of watching Ethan Peck's portrayal. In many ways, Strange New Worlds has turned Spock's inner turmoil into the emotional backbone of the show. He's not just a supporting player or comic relief. He's the lens through which the series explores what it means to belong to two worlds and not feel entirely at home in either. Peck's Spock is more openly conflicted than Nimoy's, and that's the point. This is a Spock still growing, still failing, still learning to reconcile the unbridgeable gap between who he's told to be and who he actually is. His arc isn't about reaching perfect Vulcan logic. It's about realizing that logic without empathy is hollow. So when Peck says his Vulcan-ness just won't be enough, it suggests that Spock will need to go beyond both logic and emotion towards something truer, something that connects him to the heart of Starfleet's mission, understanding love, loss, and the limits of logic. Of course, much of Spock's emotional development in Strange New Worlds has been tied to his relationships. His love triangle with Turing and Chapel isn't just romantic drama, it's symbolic of the two sides of his identity. Turing represents order, heritage, and the cultural expectations of Vulcan society. Chapel, on the other hand, embodies spontaneity, compassion, and humanity's emotional vulnerability. When Spock chose duty over desire with Turing, it made sense logically. But emotionally, he's never stopped being drawn to the human connection that Chapel represents. Season 2's heartbreaking end for the pair, with Chapel leaving for an opportunity that pulled her away from him, showed how Spock's logic couldn't shield him from pain. It also positioned him perfectly for the challenge Peck hinted at. If his Vulcan control won't be enough, perhaps Spock will finally have to confront his heartbreak head-on. For once, he might have to feel his way through a problem rather than think his way out of it. That would be a major step toward becoming the Spock who can later look Kirk in the eye and say, "The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few," because that version of Spock understands what sacrifice feels like, not just what it means logically. Strange New Worlds emotional storytelling. One of the great strengths of Strange New Worlds is how it has allowed classic Star Trek characters to be messy. Unlike earlier incarnations where stoicism and professionalism often dominated, this series has leaned into vulnerability. Captain Pike grapples with his mortality. Lon confronts trauma and isolation. Uhura navigates grief and identity. And Spock, perhaps more than anyone, embodies the beautiful, frustrating complexity of being human even when you're not entirely one. That emotional focus is what has made Strange New Worlds such a success with modern audiences. While it still delivers the classic episodic adventures and optimism of the original series, it's not afraid to show that the path to self-discovery is often uncomfortable. In that light, Season 3 could be Spock's most emotionally challenging yet. His Vulcan calm may crack under pressure, revealing just how much he's internalized the lessons of the crew around him. Maybe he'll finally understand that Starfleet's strength isn't just in its discipline or science, it's in its empathy, in the ability to see beyond binary logic. The Spock legacy, every generation's reflection. It's remarkable how every new Star Trek era reinterprets Spock for its time. Nimoy's Spock represented 1960s rationalism, the triumph of intellect and science in a world teetering on chaos. Quinto's Spock reflected the emotional turbulence of the modern age, angry, grieving, and struggling for balance. Peck's Spock, meanwhile, feels perfectly suited to today's moment. He's not defined by one identity, but constantly negotiating between multiple selves, something that resonates deeply in a world where identity, belonging, and authenticity are central cultural conversations. His journey isn't about erasing difference, it's about learning to live within it. That's why Peck's tease hits so hard. His Vulcan-ness just won't be enough speaks not only to Spock's story, but to the human condition itself. We all have moments where the traits we've built our identity on, discipline, control, intellect, fail us. And when they do, what's left is who we really are. Speculating on Season 3, what tests await Spock? While details about Strange New Worlds Season 3 remain tightly under wraps, there are hints that Spock's arc may tie into larger storylines. His connection to Turing is far from resolved, and with the Gorn War brewing, Spock might face situations that demand compassion over calculation. There's also the potential reappearance of familiar faces, perhaps Amanda Grayson or Sarek, whose expectations have always,